Jennifer introduce herself and kick us off.
All right. Hello, everybody. I am so glad you're here. As you continue to settle, if it feels interesting, you're welcome to put where you're calling in from, maybe how you found us, or an intention you had for the call today. You could throw all that in the chat if it feels interesting. And if not, maybe just kind of notice how you can continue to take care of yourself as we transition into this talk and into this topic of anticipatory grief and secondary loss for caregivers. If you were able to join me for the last talk, I am deeply passionate about self-compassion and self-care. And so anything you can do to take care of yourself, please continue to do that as we move through our conversation today. So this is where we're headed. I'll talk a little bit about myself, my intentions of why I'm here. We're going to talk about some big topics, right? Grief, anticipatory grief, secondary loss, and grief tending. And these can feel really big sometimes. So this idea of self-compassion and self-care is so critical as we move through. And please take care of yourself, whatever that looks like. At the end, we'll have a group discussion. You can share some reflections on the information. And after the reflections from our conversation here around grief, then there'll be more time to talk about general questions that you might have for Allison and the Zinnia team around dementia caregiving. So hello, I'm Jennifer. I am living on the ancestral homelands of the Coast Salish peoples, also known as Northwestern Washington. I'm deeply grateful for all of their enduring care and protection of the lands that we live on. I also like to take a moment here to acknowledge that everything I'm sharing today has been passed down to me from my teachers, and they have learned it from their teachers. And so a lot of this wisdom has been passed down for thousands of years. And I like to acknowledge and thank all the wisdom keepers who have shared this so that we all can benefit from this information today. This is me. I wear a lot of hats. I am deeply passionate about community care, and I love embodiment practices like yoga and qigong. I love self-reflection practices like meditation and health and wellness coaching. I also offer care in grief and death care spaces. And I work in community nonprofit work, helping to develop wellness programs in local communities. So lots of different hats, lots of different things. And if I were to summarize it all, I would say that I care wildly and deeply about my community and about life. I was born in the late 70s, and so the Care Bears are definitely a very central part of my being, and I resonate a lot with all the ways that they care in the world, and that feels like a deep part of my being as well. I deeply believe that we are not meant to carry hard experiences alone. That community is an essential part of our well-being in life, and especially sharing community in grief and death. This is one of the most potent and powerful ways to feel connected to life and to each other. And I'm passionate about creating and sharing spaces that offer the opportunity for this exploration. And this is why I'm here, right? That's my intention, to be here with you today to talk about some of these parts of our human experience. And you might take a moment now to get curious, why are you here? If at the end of this session you were to say, that's exactly what I needed, what might have happened? Just a moment to reflect on intentions, what called you here, and the answer, I don't know, I just showed up, is absolutely welcome. There are many times in life where we don't know, and that's absolutely okay. So today we're talking about some emotions, right? And this is a topic that some people love, some people don't really care for. You know, it's a big topic, can carry some weight to it. I believe that emotions are energy in motion. Different emotions have different movements. Kind of anger is up and out, excitement up and out, grief down and in, right? We can feel physically in our body when emotions might be moving. So my invitation is let them move. right? If you need a big breath or a small breath, if you need a hug, a sigh, if you want to tense and release or rock and sway, any other embodiment practices you might have that feel supportive, please invite that in throughout the practice, right? Throughout our time together as we're talking, it's always welcome and really encouraged and invited in this talk today around grief. Another invitation to care for yourself. Notice what you need off screen, get up, walk around the room, hydrate, take a break, maybe leave the conversation for a moment if it starts to feel overwhelming. You've got the replay. These slides will be given to you afterwards. So you'll be able to access all of this information in your own time. So please take care of yourself, whatever that is. I also love this idea of beauty medicine. I try to invite in different images that I find beautiful. So if there's something in your room or out your window that's beautiful, maybe just taking a moment to kind of sit and look at it while you listen to me talk through. If you are someone who likes to take notes, you're absolutely welcome to. But as I mentioned, you will have access to these slides and this recording. So if taking notes isn't supportive for you, you can rest back, listen, and see what shows up for you. Another reminder that this is a lifelong practice, being with grief, right? Walking with grief, self-compassion, self-care. And so the invitation is practice and presence over perfection, right? We're just going to show up the best we can in every moment, a little bit at a time. Okay, so we are going to get into our conversation today. And before we dig into the nuances of anticipatory grief and secondary loss, I'm going to invite us to explore this bigger umbrella and experience of grief. Now, my grief teacher, Megan Devine, is a mental health professional, and she says grief is always in the room. This is a part of our human experience. And I want to normalize here that grief is a natural response to change. It's a natural response, it's normal. And this can sometimes feel contradictory to messages we get from society or from our family of origin or from different aspects of life. And grief is a natural response to change. It's not limited to death. Loss comes in many different forms and it affects us on many different layers, emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually, and maybe others that I'm not naming that are true for you. Now, I love this image here again from my teacher. Grief related to death, the tip of the iceberg, and then the everyday grief that we don't talk to grief, that we don't call grief, right? This expanse of this particular human experience that comes up in our kind of cognitive awareness, and then also it's happening under the surface subconsciously. Another way I like to look at this image is maybe the grief that we share with others, and then the grief that we experience in the entirety of our humanity. That there are different ways that we share grief, and all of us are going to be different in how that happens. I'll talk about that in a bit. So as we move through these topics, all of them, I love to invite in both and thinking. Our humanity, this human experience is so complex and vast, and we have this ability to feel different things in the same moment, different experiences, sometimes opposite things at the same time. And so wherever possible, offering space for this in your experience today and in your experience with grief, whenever it arises. Someone can feel both sad that their loved one is sick and happy that they have a new grandchild or about another experience in their life. We can both wish that the illness of our loved one is over and wish that they could keep on living. All of this is welcome, whatever your experience and your truth is. This practice of not making ourselves wrong for what we're feeling. And so different types of loss that may arise in our lives outside of death, right? Divorce, losing a job, losing a home, the loss of our health, the loss of our independence. so many different ways that loss might show up. And in these moments, also grief may arise. And I want to normalize that not everybody feels grief during loss. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, I love this other framework from psychologist Francis Weller from his book, The Wild Edge of Sorrow, The Six Gates of Grief. The first gate being everything that we love, we lose. Speaking to the impermanence of our lives and everything that exists within it. Also, other aspects that may feel grief in our experience are the parts of us that have not known love, the sorrows of the world, what we expected and we did not receive, ancestral grief, and the harms that we've done. Many different ways and doorways for grief to express. And again, grief is always in the room. Another helpful aspect when walking with grief and tending to grief is this idea of tend and befriend. So rather than judging or turning away or resisting these emotions that can feel really heavy and intense, perhaps we invite curiosity and compassion. We tend and befriend as we walk with grief. So you might think of a friend that you care about very deeply, whether they're having a hard time or a good time. You're there with them, seeing how you can care and help and support and celebrate them in all of the vast expanse of their life. What might it be like to offer that same curiosity, compassion, and care to ourselves? It's not always easy. So we practice. Remember, presence and practice over perfection. Now, I love to think as emotions as messengers, offering us clarity, kind of a North Star to how we might find balance in our lives. And so some messages that might come from grief could be it's orienting us to what's most important and essential in life. Grief can tend to strip away things that really just don't feel important. Grief can help us deepen our appreciation for this one precious life. It can help us increase self-awareness. And it often invites us to slow down, reflect, restore, and renew. And so this is where we might invite that curiosity with grief. Are there any other messages that grief is bringing for you when it does express in your experience? Just as there are many different forms of loss, there are many different ways that grief expresses. We are all so incredibly unique in our humanity, in each of our individual expressions. And so the way we grieve will be unique. There's no wrong way to grieve. There's no wrong way. It will show up for you in whatever way feels right for the moment. So really getting curious, how do I grieve? Honoring I might grieve in different ways for different experiences. And we come back to this idea of both and. Maybe I grieve in several of these ways, in different moments and different times. So whether you're someone who expresses emotions or you prefer to keep it internal, whether you like to move your grief through action and purpose, or you prefer to get more reflective in spiritual practice or creativity or something else. There's no wrong way to grieve. If the way you grieve is not on this slide right now, which could be very likely, it's not wrong. Normalizing this natural response to change and all the different ways it expresses. I mentioned grief shows up in many different layers and many different experiences. This ability to feel different things at the same time and not make ourselves wrong for it. Again, from Megan Devine, different normal or common experiences inside grief. Sleep disturbances, difficulty reading, intrusive thoughts, cognitive changes, emotional flooding, increased anxiety, not being interested in things that you used to be interested in, and many, many more. So many common ways that grief expresses. And so this can feel heavy sometimes, right? Like, whoa, okay, let's take a moment here. Is there a way that you want to just maybe stretch or take a deep breath or put your hand on your heart, maybe sway a little bit, take a drink, a warm beverage, a way to hydrate yourself? This invitation to continue to care for yourself as we move through at any point that it feels important or meaningful for you. So now we've explored this vast landscape of grief. We'll start to look into a nuance of anticipatory grief, which is very common in caregiving. This is a grief that expresses before a loss. And this is a natural and normal expression of emotion. One of the hardest things we'll have to do is grieve the loss of someone who is still alive. We come back to some common expressions of grief. So just as grief expressed on that other slide we're looking at, anticipatory grief has similar expressions. There's so much here that has the opportunity to express, right? Shock, denial, disbelief, hopelessness, helplessness, anger, guilt, loss of energy, digestive issues. So much here. Normalizing that this is a common and normal experience, that there's nothing wrong with you if these are expressing. This is a part of grief. So we may get curious. What are some messages from anticipatory grief? It might invite us to explore and share feelings with our loved ones and the person who's dying or at the end of life or is sick. It invites the opportunity to shift our priorities to what is most important during the time that is here. And the opportunity to offer love and compassion to ourselves and our person who is sick, dying, or at the end of life. So when we're living with anticipatory grief, some ways that help us to walk with grief and remain curious and open to this experience. This reminder that it's okay to feel sadness and frustration and even relief. Accepting, acknowledging, meeting our emotions can help us process that. Talking to close friends and family or support groups can be really helpful, and you're already taking a step being here in this support group. Getting information that will help you to move forward in the best way possible in your life. Spending quality time with the person who is dying or sick. Making new memories. Finding ways to cherish the time that is still here. And also, because grief is so physically and emotionally exhausting, finding ways to care and nurture for yourself. Resting, nourishing, restoring. It also can be helpful to speak with professionals, right? A therapist, a counselor, a coach, to explore guidance and coping strategies that meet you where you are in your life, that are practical and meaningful for you. Maybe another self-care break here. Maybe you want to squeeze and release the body a few times, breathe, little swaying, just anything at all that continues to help us digest this information as well as care for our bodies as we move through.
Hey, Jennifer, this is Allison. I'm so sorry to interrupt the flow. I heard from one of our attendees who is not seeing the slides, but I do see the slides. So I just wanted to make sure I'm not the only one who sees the slides. Do most people see the slides in their screen? Ron, I see you. If you see the slides, would you raise your hand? Yep, there we go. Okay, Larry, I'm so sorry. I'm not sure why you are not seeing them, but they're on the screen.
I will
And
find
remember that.
I will find them.
Oh, okay, cool. And you will receive them in email. So yeah, okay, cool. Sorry, everybody. Continue.
Yeah, thank you, Allison. I'm glad we checked on that. Okay, so another nuance that can come through as we are caregiving, as we're experiencing anticipatory grief and grief, is secondary loss. And this arises as a result from a loss that you've experienced. So sometimes it's called the domino effect, this cascading impact of one loss and how it ripples out into our lives. You could think of a still lake and a drop and everything that's affected and impacted, the interconnectedness of our lives. An accumulation of all the unexpected ways loss may impact life, and maybe some of them are expected. This graphic may be a little hard to see on the slides. As I mentioned, you'll get this later, but this shows this idea of all these different ways, all these different losses that may accompany anticipatory grief and showing up in caregiving. So this could be the loss of health, the loss of dreams for a future, the loss of intimacy, the loss of a support system, maybe the loss of friends and hobbies. If it's a partner, this might be a loss of the couple that we were. And it can also be accompanied by ambiguous loss specific to dementia. The person is physically here, but mentally and emotionally absent. There's a lot here, a lot of loss. And it's normal if this feels heavy and overwhelming. Looking at this slide makes me feel overwhelmed for sure. Right? We looked at this in our first talk that we had last time, common struggles when caregiving. Right? We've got financial, social isolation, a physical toll, the mental and emotional strain, relational strain. There's so much here. So many different experiences that we're having that are so complex. And so looking at all that, of course, you're having a hard time. Of course, there's so much here that you're carrying. Right? You're doing so well, holding a very heavy experience. And we have this opportunity to tend and befriend, right? To offer our self-care, breath, movement. How can I let emotion move through me as a natural response to change and loss? Self-compassion and care. And I also want to normalize, sometimes this isn't it. Sometimes we just need to yell and rage and let our emotions move, right? Fierce compassion, fierce love. How would that like to move through you, through this experience? So we've talked a lot about these different aspects of grief, and I'm just touching on them, right? There is the possibility to deep dive into all of these different subjects. We're talking, we're bringing it to our awareness. We're normalizing that this is a part of our human experience. And as we do this, we might explore this idea of grief tending or grief care. So if we're befriending grief, if grief is a normal expression of our humanity, it's not something that we're going to try and fix. When we turn towards these essential truths, everything that we love, we will lose. This could invite us to deepen our appreciation for this one precious life, or maybe it's an invitation for something else for you. This essential truth that it's okay if you're not okay. That grief is a natural and normal response to loss. I love this idea. I don't have the person who gave the quote, but grief is love in its wildest expression. And I love this idea of wild expression. There's no controlling it. It shows up whether we want it or not. It does what it wants. It moves in the way it wants. It expresses in the way it wants. And it is an expression of love. Both and. Grief is not a problem to fix. The invitation is it can be an experience to tend to. And I also want to normalize that for some of us, maybe we don't turn towards grief at all. And that is okay. That is also a way of grieving. There's no wrong way to grieve. In your own time, in your own way. So in grief tending, if we do choose to turn towards this experience, we might invite curiosity over judgment. It's so normal for our inner critics, for judgment internally and externally from the world. There are a lot of opinions about how we should be grieving and in what way and in what timeline. And your grief is your own, your timeline is your own, your way is your own. We might invite compassion over pressure, right? Again, this judgment, this, oh, I shouldn't or I should be doing something, rather than, oh, this is what's here. Hey, you're doing great, holding a very heavy experience. Self-care over self-abandonment. As caregivers, it can be really, really easy for us to care for other people and put our own care on the back burner. We talked about this the last time I was here with you, and there is a replay if you're interested in deep diving into self-care and self-compassion. But this idea of how do I renew, restore, and fill my cup so the care that I'm offering others is coming from a place of overflowing, or at least I'm putting in as much as I'm putting out, right? That we are finding more balance in our output by caring for ourselves with our input. And this involves boundaries, right? Protecting our energy through boundaries, saying no, creating space, tending and befriending our experience, whatever is showing up. This is a slide here about boundaries. I love this idea. No is a complete sentence. It can be very normal if we're feeling guilty or overwhelmed, that we feel like we need to over-explain or that we need to justify our time that we need. But your needs matter. No is a complete sentence. What are different ways that you can care for yourself by saying no and creating space in your grief? Grief invites us to slow down, turn inward, and this can often ask us to protect our energy and our time, creating more space to be with whatever your expression is. Different ways that we might reduce overwhelm in our lives, right? Creating boundaries, asking for help. Really tricky. It's so easy to say and very challenging for some of us to do. And these boundaries can support clarity and emotional well-being. Again, another phrase that I love, I'm not sure who said it, but micro joys support macro grief. This idea of small moments, small glimmers in our day, small moments of beauty, a warm cup of coffee or tea, a beautiful scene in nature, right? A hug from a loved one, spending time with your beloved pet. All these little moments of joy and beauty and well-being. And when we can invite those a little and often, it can help us when we're feeling these really big, overwhelming, unbearable emotions and experiences. You might think of restorative activities that feel renewing for you. All right. For some of us, that is rest. That is slow movement. This is slowing down. And for some of us, maybe it isn't. Maybe it's a walk in nature, time gardening, maybe creating something, right? Singing, dancing. Maybe there's movement in the body, right? Exercise, yoga, or social connection. All these different curiosities about how do I care for myself when I'm feeling grief? What would that look like for me? If the answer is, I don't know, that's absolutely normal and okay. It is an invitation to explore. We don't have to have all the answers right now. And so we're coming to a point now. I've covered most of the information that I'm going to share with you today. It was a lot, right? A waterfall of information. And so we have some time now to reflect and think about some of this. How does this affect me? And so if you're someone who likes to write, maybe you pick one, these are kind of 3 different sections. Maybe you just pick 2 of these questions. Maybe take a moment to write down a few words that come to mind, or maybe you want to reflect internally, just think about it. And we're going to have a chance to share our reflections shortly. So just taking a moment here, maybe the next 60 seconds, to think about one or more of these questions that you would like to reflect on. And if reflection doesn't feel interesting, maybe a moment of self-care, right? Notice if you want to move or stretch or hydrate or just anything else that feels interesting or supportive for you. Now, I will come back to the reflection prompt slide shortly, but we'll have a moment now. You can share in the chat if you'd like to come off mute. This particular share is about reflections on what I just covered, right? Grief, anticipatory grief, secondary loss. And as we share experiences, they could be from those reflection prompts or maybe something else in your lived experience that you'd like to share here in a group of other caregivers. As we share, I want to invite this practice of listening without fixing, right? This practice of being present, offering compassion and presence to people as we share our lived experience without offering suggestions, trying to fix it, even from a place of helpfulness. This is not a time for solutions. After we're done with this talk, we will go into a Q&A, a bigger Q&A, where we can start to ask for advice and ask for solutions and really help share resources. But in this moment right now, in this conversation, my request is to let this be about self-expression versus trying to navigate someone else's experience. And so we'll come back to our reflection prompts here. I'll leave them up here. And we have a time now. If anybody's interested in sharing, either in the chat or coming off of mute, your experiences with grief, with secondary loss, any thoughts about the information that I've shared so far, or your responses to these reflection inquiries.
I noticed that Terry has had their hand up, and so I wanted to give an opportunity first to recognize that. Terry, I don't know if you'd like to say something. Okay.
We'll take a little more time here, continuing to reflect internally. If anybody would like to share and reflect externally, there's space for that as well. We'll take another minute or so here for this time. We have some reflections in the chat. A micro joy from Steve equals ice cream or a cookie. Yes, yes, yes. Wendy shares, I'm sad to feel like my spouse's current illness and loss of abilities will become the big memory that I have of him, overshadowing our previous happy times. Yeah. Barry shares, I am anticipating that things are going to get harder and harder. Yeah. This curiosity, what would it be like to find steadiness and balance during unbearable time? What might we need to invite steadiness and balance as we move through a very difficult experience? Carol shares, grief when I realized I can no longer care for my husband at home. Yeah, big loss. Allison shares, the stress of feeling I need to hide my grief so I don't burn other people out. Yeah, so real. I feel like we might need to shrink or hide or push down to protect other people. Giannia shares, I'm tired that people said to me, you're tough, you can handle this. I am so with you on that. Just because we are tough doesn't mean that it makes it any easier. Myra shares, I grieve the loss of my life, my friends, and my hobbies. I feel imprisoned in my own house taking care of my mom with advanced dementia. Yeah, so much loss. So much loss. Carol shares, needing to give myself permission to make a decision. Yes, it's a powerful way to support yourself. Gay shares, grief for myself that I am no longer able to do all I used to do due to balance issues and getting older. Steve shares, anticipating the end of a meaningful life. Yeah, this is real. This is so real. And this curiosity, what would it be like to create a meaningful life in the new? This meaningful life has an ending. And what a meaningful life look like as we move into the new? Tammy shares, my strength is being able to compartmentalize, staying strong when needed, but also being compassionate as I visit with my husband. Yeah, looking at these strengths, this is really hard. I do have strengths that can help me move through. Lindsay shares, I'm grieving the repair I was hoping to do with my dad, who has Alzheimer's, and embracing that I will now do it alone and with community. Yes, Lindsay, this ambiguous loss. So tender. Gay shares grief about the state of what is happening in this country. Yes, more grief, more loss. Lindsay shares, my grief needs safe and non-judgmental community. I need to remember again and again that we are not alone. Yes, Lindsay. This idea of grieving in community, of being in community during unbearable times. Sue shares, we recorded my husband tell me how much he loves me so that when he forgets to tell me, or no, now I have the recordings. We did this 2 weeks ago. Yeah, this tender space with anticipatory grief. What kind of care, what might still be available to help my grief tending as I move through? Marilyn shares, I grieve my husband taking care of me. Yeah. This loss of care and intimacy with a partner. Gay shares, my strength is the ability to listen well and being compassionate that seems to be helping others learn about and deal with all the different griefs you have presented. Yeah, again, what is my strength here that helps me find steadiness and balance in very challenging times? Zinnia shares, I'm tired that people said this to me. You're tough. You can handle this. Oh, I think we looked at this. I might be cycling through some of them now. Wendy, I grieve that my young adult children don't have as much of my attention and presence as they deserve and are also losing their dad when he's only in his 50s. Yeah, all these secondary losses that emerge for us and the people that we care about. Steve shares a strength helping others. Gay shares, I too am able to compartmentalize. The trick is not to get stuck and to know when I need to reach out for myself. Fortunately, I have good friends that I know I can call on whenever needed. We set up a time to share back and forth. Ron shares, my wife has been unable to talk for 2 years. I can't help anticipating I will never again hear her say, I love you before she dies. So tender. Nicole shares, I just miss my mom. Yeah. Eve, I know you don't mean it, but boy, is this depressing. Yeah, this is heavy, right? Okay. So, this idea of sharing the weight and the burdens in community, to be able to speak the truth of our lived experience. You might notice how that feels for you. It may not be right for you. That's absolutely okay. All of the invitations that I've offered today, my hope is that they orient you to your truth, to the best way to navigate grief for you. And that might be doing something completely opposite than what I've shared today. And these ideas of how can we continue to find community during challenging, depressing, unbearable times. The idea of rather than trying to fix things and solve things, to be with each other while we hurt. The power and the healing that can come from that experience as well. How can we care for ourselves as we're navigating an unbearable experience? How can we ask for care from our loved ones around us? so that we're not carrying all of this alone. So many questions. We might be walking away from this talk with more questions than answers, right? It's so normal. You can think of these like seeds that we're planting. We might water them, nurture them. We might just let them sit there and see when the answers come. I love this phrase, some years are for questions, some years are for answers. We could replace that with decades even. Right? Letting things unfold in their own natural time. As we turn towards the end of this discussion, these reminders that grief is love in motion in its wildest expression, and that you are not alone as you move through this and navigate this. If it feels interesting, you could think of one small step that you might take this week. After all the things we explored today, is there an aligned action that feels really important and meaningful for you to take as you continue to digest and get curious about how this information might impact your life? And if there's a gem from today's session, I call a gem something like a takeaway, an aha moment, something that you'll be carrying forward with you that felt meaningful to you from the conversation and the information we explored. And you could share your gem in the chat, or if you want to come off mute or share it as we move into the bigger Q&A, you can do that. A self-kindness and self-compassion reminder, I am always doing the best I can. Always doing the best I can. And I like to, as we talked about all of these different ways that you might seek care from community, from loved ones, from therapists, different ways that I also offer care with those who are going through unbearable times. I offer different types of emotional well-being conversations where we can talk about what would it look like to create a self-care toolkit for you? What would a meaningful life, creating a meaningful life, look like for you now and in the future? I offer grief care, ways to explore a grief care toolkit. How can I care for myself? What would it look like to really think about that now and be able to communicate that to the people in my life so that as I continue to walk with grief, others are able to support me in that process? And I also offer death care and end-of-life planning. What would a meaningful death be like for you, for your loved ones? As we walk into this season of winter in life, how can we continue to make it meaningful? If you'd like to explore other ways that I offer care, you're welcome to check out my website. I would love to have a conversation and see what would feel supportive for you. I'll also be back on April 7th here with the Zinnia Caregiver Series group. We'll be exploring the dying process and meaningful ritual. So we'll talk through some of the steps that you might notice and see as the person you're caring for is moving closer towards death, ways that you can help to offer them comfort and yourself comfort through this process. And what would a meaningful ritual be like for you before, during, and after the death of someone that you care about? Thank you all for your presence, for sharing this time together. Again, if you'd like to reach out, my email, my website, and we will look at opening this up now. I'll turn it back over to Allison for the larger Q&A. Thank you all.